The time is just gone, 8:39 a.m. as we continue this morning, and our entire broadcast on News and Views this morning is focused on Palestine and what has been playing out in the Palestinian territories. And this morning, we have the honor, we have the pleasure of being joined by Professor Sami Al-Arian, who is with the Center for Islam and Global Affairs, joining us out of Turkey. Now, coming against what is playing out in Gaza, turning Gaza from a concentration camp to an extermination camp. We see the brutality, we see the genocide that is unfolding. We see an Arab world where prior to this, talking of normalization, there was a strong build-up to that point, and all of this has happened, and we see Western Europe, we see the likes of United States of America and other world leaders towing the pro-Israeli line to the extent that even banning Palestinian symbols in their country, and also the slowness of a Muslim leadership to react to what is playing out. Dr. Sami Al-Arian, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, Dr. Sami, there is just so much to unpack. There is so much to actually talk about since the developments had taken place from the 7th, since the unprecedented action on the part of Hamas. But what has been playing out tells us so much that we can actually unpack and we can analyze. And just to get an overview from yourself before we get into some of the detail.
Well, I mean, certainly the Palestinian people have been under occupation, everybody knows, for decades. And in the past year, there has been a lot of changes within the Israeli society where they wanted actually to end the conflict on their terms. There have been storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque almost on a daily basis, particularly in the past 3 weeks prior to the latest clashes. There has been also trying to have incursions and storming of refugee camps, particularly in Jenin, Nablus, Tulkarim, Hawara, where they would be kidnapping people, assassinating people. This year alone, over 250 Palestinians were killed in the West Bank, point blank, including 40 children. There was also no attempt whatsoever to exchange prisoners, over 5,500 Palestinian prisoners. And even though the Hamas had tried to exchange the ones that it had, the Israeli government completely were oblivious to this. They didn't want to deal with them. But even on top of that, they were, with Ben Gvir taking over the prison system, many pressures applied to the prisoners. Many people died in prison on hunger strikes and others. Over 1,250 people were in administrative detentions without being charged for months after months after months, some of them for years. A siege on Gaza, over 16 years of crippling siege. All that were part to the decision to fight back, to resist. No one can blame the victim in trying to break into his chains. So what we have seen in the past few days is the largest prison break in the largest open-air prison in the world, where Palestinians decided that enough is enough. And what we've seen also is a daring fight. You know, we're really the true manifestation of David versus Goliath, where you have few hundred determined men fed up with the situation, and they wanted to break their chains and punish their jailers.
Yes, but also, Dr. Sami, we have seen the world seeking condemnation of Hamas. And as we have witnessed since Israel has started this brutal campaign in Gaza and also in many other areas all around Palestine, whether we're talking about Al-Quds or the West Bank, is becoming more and more brutal to the point that they're talking about extermination of the people of Palestine, wiping them right off the map. And this is the narrative that the entire world, the Western world in particular, is pushing to the point that they are preparing to support the Zionist entity in each and every way. We know what the Americans have done, sending gunships, sending military aircraft and arming Israel, but also looking at Europe, where the latest we've seen, even talking about sending rescue teams to rescue hostages in Gaza.
Well, the Zionist movement, as you know, is a racist, exclusivist, settler colonial movement that's trying to uproot the people of Palestine and replace them with Jews. They never recognized the Palestinian people. They never recognized the humanity of the Palestinian people. So it's not surprising that they will try to describe them in words that will dehumanize the Palestinians. They try to completely ignore the existence and the narrative of the Palestinian people. And it's not surprising that the West, which actually helped in creating the Zionist state, that they will completely ignore the plight of the Palestinians and embrace the Zionist narrative. And what they have seen this time around is that the Palestinians were able to bloody the nose of the Zionists of the state, and they couldn't fathom the fact that the Palestinians are able to fight back and resist and win. And they didn't, particularly the United States, they didn't want to see this model, this resistance model, triumph. That this resistance model could be an inspiring act to people across the region. They are the ones who actually are pushing the Israelis to storm the Gaza and have this horrific bombardment where they have killed thousands of people. They have committed war crimes and genocide. The Americans are supplying them with arms. They are lying. The president of the United States is a liar, is a denier. He doesn't want to face the facts. He doesn't want to recognize the humanity of the Palestinians. He always talks about with lies and deceits. I mean, nothing that he said in his address the other day is true. There had been absolutely no rapes. No one has even shown an ounce of evidence that there was any rape. There was no beheading of children. All these are Zionist lies and deceptions. And they're trying to rally the world so that they can go and commit genocide and commit wars against the humanity by going and killing thousands, committing these atrocities and getting away with it. That has been the MO of the Zionist movement, of the Zionist state, throughout its history.
Yes, and also looking at Israel itself, and we've heard about Benjamin Netanyahu being described as a frightened, humiliated gangster, and he will seek all support because this is not only about the Palestinians. It is about freedom. It is about freedom versus apartheid. It is about justice versus brutality, and this is a narrative that the Western world fails to understand. And sometimes when we talk of condemnation, or we see the condemnation coming out of the West for Hamas, but in terms of condemning Israel, these condemnations cannot come with passive words. They need to be condemned in the strongest possible words, Dr. Sami.
Yes, the West is always uh, using double speak and double standards. When they talk in the context of Ukraine, all the things that the Ukrainians do are heroic. They are to be supported. They are to be given the narrative. They are to be embraced. They are to be given all the resources they need in their fight against the Russians. When it comes to the Palestinians, it's totally the opposite, where the Palestinians are who are the victims of Israel for over 75 years. And what do? They start describing them in this uh, uh, in these terms, where you totally dehumanize them. They see hundreds of children being indiscriminately massacred, and yet they don't see any kind of humanity towards the Palestinians. What they want is to end the resistance, is to finish off the resistance, is to give Israel carte blanche to do what it wants, to basically take over the whole land of Palestine, confiscate what they want, take the Holy Mosque in Jerusalem, and to normalize with other Arab regimes so that Israel would be integrated in the region and would have the final say. It will be the hegemon in the region. Just look at what happened the past few days. They are dictating the terms. If Egypt starts giving humanitarian aid, they're going to bomb the trucks. they bombed the entrance. They bombed all kinds of help that Egypt or other uh, countries are willing to give, and they threaten. They go and besiege Gaza for over 16 years, and no other country dares to question that siege or try to break it. I mean, who is the hegemon they have veto power over what kind of arms the states around them would take. The only one, or the only ones rather, who are challenging the hegemony, the Israeli hegemony is the resistance, whether that resistance is in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Lebanon or in other places. It's very clear what the role of Israel is and what the colonial power, the European and American states want to do in the region. They want Israel to be the only country that could have this kind of power and that could be the ruler of the region.
Yes, Dr. Sami, we're going to put you on hold. We're going to go for a quick ad break, and we'll be back with you in a minute or two.
Moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Education, health, dignity, empowerment. These wishes all begin with water. Africa Muslims Agency is committed to providing clean water to the thousands who still live without this basic human right. Support us in giving the best of charities. Provide a water well for 14,800 Rand or a borehole for 49,500 Rand in Afghanistan or 55,000 Rand in Africa. Gain Thawabi Jariyah and help communities to reach their full potential. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
Are you ready to ignite a wave of compassion and make a lasting impact? This Rabi'ul Awal, let's come together for something truly meaningful. Join Penny Appeal South Africa's Rabi'ul Awal campaign. Build a water well, provide a hot meal, sponsor a food garden, or plant an olive tree in Palestine or fruit tree in South Africa. Make a difference today. Visit our website www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Your giving, their dawn of hope.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
We continue our broadcast this morning on News and Views, and our entire broadcast this morning is focused on what is playing out in Palestine. And we continue our interview with Dr. Sami Al-Arian. Now, Dr. Sami, just talking about the Muslim world, on Saturday, in the words of Ismail Haniya, he said that the unprecedented action that Hamas had taken, that this is not only about the people of Palestine, this is also about the Arab world, this is also about the Muslim Ummah, this is about Masjid al-Aqsa, and this is the responsibility that Palestine has taken on behalf of a Muslim Ummah that is over 1.6 billion strong. And we know during the build-up to what had taken place on Saturday, there was the strong normalization talk, and we know normalization with Israel was gaining momentum to the point that Saudi Arabia was also on the verge of normalization. And knowing what we do now, and what Israel has been doing, and the brutality and the genocide that has been unfolding, again, the point you made about Egypt being threatened for aiding the Palestinians, but we've also seen the slowness of the reaction of a Muslim world who knew that this would be the consequences that the people of Palestine and Gaza would face.
The reaction of the Muslim world, particularly the governments, are extremely disappointing. But it's not surprising because we've seen this film before. We've seen this episode before. And that's precisely what the objective, what the goal of the United States and other powers, European powers, want. They want a Muslim world that is totally insombre, that it does not defend itself. And when they see that example, that model of the Palestinians refusing, rising up, where the colonized is refusing to accept its colonizing power. See, no one can blame what the Palestinians are doing. But what they want is not, they don't want the Palestinians to rise up and resist. And the Muslim world, particularly, as I said, the governments want to make sure that doesn't happen. We've seen it before in the Arab Spring, where it was frustrated by giving the counter-revolutionaries the power to frustrate the revolutionary powers, these revivalists, these revolutionaries who wanted to make a change, real change, to really have representative governments. So the United States doesn't want any of that. And to make sure that doesn't happen, they empower Israel and give it all the resources, the weapons, the diplomatic support, the protections it needs. And what they saw this past weekend, is that there were a small number of people who are willing to fight back and humiliate this colonizing power. No one can blame what the colonized does in order to defend themselves. This is what they don't want to see. I mean, it's no difference from what the Algerians were doing to the French, or the Vietnamese doing to the Americans, or other freedom fighting people to gain or regain their freedom. And that's exactly what they want. So they're trying to bypass the Palestinians and end this conflict by trying to make sure that they get the most important Arab countries into the fold of this process, to normalize with Israel and frustrate the aspirations and future of their citizens. We saw this back in 1978-79 with Egypt during the Camp David Accords and the so-called peace treaty in 79. We saw it, they tried to drag the Palestinians into a process that they know it would be fruitless, that the Palestinians will not get anything, because the Zionists would totally refuse to even recognize the Palestinians. What happened in Oslo in 1993 was for the Palestinian leadership at the time to recognize Israel on 78% of historical Palestine, in return that they would recognize the PLO as the sole representative of the Palestinian people, which is really meaningless recognition, because after that, the PLO went into hibernation. It doesn't really exist in practice anymore. They created a Palestinian Authority that will be complacent and pliant authority to protect the settlers from the anger and from the resistance of the Palestinian people by bribing its officials. And then they tried to go and integrate other countries with Israel so that they could not give the Palestinians anything. They started with the so-called deal of the century. So they had the Emiratis and then the Moroccans and the Bahrainis, and they tried with other countries such as the Mauritanians and the Sudanese and so on and so forth. But the biggest prize would have been Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, historically speaking, they always had an initiative that was predicated on the fact that they would not normalize with Israel unless there is a Palestinian state on at least the 22% of Palestinian land that was that was invaded and confiscated back in 1967. Then you have this boy king, this new ruler of Saudi Arabia. His only interest is to make sure that he would become king and that he would receive the protection and help and assistance of the United States. So he's willing to sell out the Palestinians and start his own normalization process in return of that. What happened is that this operation, this Al-Aqsa flood operation, put a stop to this normalization train. It halted it. And I doubt very much that this process would conclude or would have any kind of life next year. And I think that's a huge outcome of what has happened in terms of that the people could see that the Palestinians are unwilling to be bypassed, unwilling to be run over, unwilling to be dealt with like Native Americans or others, to be in reservation camps, and they refuse not to have their own freedom. And that's one of the important implications of what happened this weekend.
Yes, and also, Dr. Sami, interesting you mentioned the Arab Spring, because looking at to what extent the Arab world needs to take responsibility for what is taking place in Palestine, because it was in the aftermath of the Arab Spring that movements like the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, were neutralized. It was in the aftermath of the Arab Spring where people like Mohammed Morsi was in power and then taken out of power, and we know he had committed himself to the Palestinian cause. We know what is taking place at the Rafah crossing as we speak right now. So to a large extent, the Arab leaders neutralize their own people. We know the situation on the ground is very, very different. Where majority of the people, we've seen protest action taking place in many parts around the world, including Turkey, where you are, where on the ground, the sentiment is very, very strong. The sentiment is a pro-Palestinian sentiment.
No doubt that there's a huge difference between the reaction of Arab leaders and other Islamic leaders when compared to the masses. The masses are indeed full of rage and wanted to see the Palestinians free, and they wanted to see Al-Aqsa Mosque back in the fold of Muslims and Christians, and not in the hands of Israeli racist settlers who would like to exclude not only the Palestinian Muslims, but also the Christians from having any say over their holy places. We've seen this before. So it's not surprising that what we see today, particularly because the United States is pushing in that direction, the masses are not going to allow this to happen. I think right now we are in a transitional period, but I don't think this on the long term would stay as is. I do not believe that the Israelis who are trying to end this conflict by basically giving the Palestinians three choices, as Smotrich is saying, and basically the plan of the current extreme right-wing government in Israel is that they would either be subject to the Jewish state. In other words, that they would have to accept Israel in its expansionist, exclusivist way and live as second class or even simply as subjects without any political or legal rights, or that they could emigrate and they would help them and give them some compensation or be killed. These are the three choices given to the Palestinians. And what the Palestinians said emphatically with all their factions, everybody, that is unacceptable, and we will resist our colonizers until we get back our freedom and independence. That's what's at heart here. So all this rhetoric from the Zionists that this is unprecedented attack on innocent civilians in their homes is absolutely not true. This narrative of the Zionists and their backers, the US president and Western leaders, is deceptive, is absolutely not true. These are lying in order to kill the leaders of the resistance and try to finish off any kind of resistance so that they can continue to institute and execute their plans.
Yes, and just talking about the hostages that have been taken by Hamas into Gaza, and we've heard the latest where European nations are also planning some sort of a rescue mission to rescue these hostages. But looking at it from a Muslim world, we've seen President Erdogan make a statement and requesting that these hostages be released. And just looking at what position we as a Muslim world or the Muslim leadership around the world find themselves in, are we in a position to negotiate at all? Are we in a position of weakness when we are negotiating, when we hear statements that Hamas needs to release these hostages, Dr. Sami?
I don't see these leaders calling for the release of Palestinian hostages, over 5,500 people living in harsh, inhumane conditions where they are denied to see their families or call their families or have any kind of relationship, where many of them are being detained today without a single charge being placed on them. Over 1,250 people are in such condition. Over 5,500 Palestinians are in these conditions. No one is talking about their plight. No one is pleading with the colonizer to release them. So I reject this notion of trying to equate the victim with the victimizer. Uh, what Hamas did and what the other resistance factions did is that they took people because they, from experience, they know that the only way they're going to get their people back is by taking prisoners themselves. This has been proven over and over again throughout the history of this conflict. The only time Israel would release Palestinian prisoners who have been living in hell without seeing their children is through exchange of prisoners. There is not another path. I didn't see any of these countries releasing a single prisoner. Actually, there was an agreement between the Palestinian Authority and Israel, brokered by the United States, that they would release almost 1,000 prisoners back in the late 90s. Israel refused because it could do so. And the only time Israel released Palestinian prisoners when there was a prisoner named Gilad Shalit, and at the time, they released over 1,000 prisoners in exchange. And the resistance movements have been telling the Israelis that we have 3 or 4 in the Gaza Strip. Let's do something about it. And they totally refused to deal with them. Now they would have to deal with them because there are not just 3 or 4, there are probably over 100 of them. So this is really disingenuous from these leaders to call on the victim, on the colonized, to act in a way that they don't ask the colonizer to do. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I think they should be ashamed of themselves to call for such an action without calling on the colonizer to release the victims.
Well, Dr. Sami, you and I can engage a lot more, and I'm sure there's just so much more you can bring to this discussion. But unfortunately, time has been of the essence. But we thank you. We say Jazakallah khairan to you for taking time out this morning and being part of this broadcast right here on Salam Media. All the best to you, sir. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Sami Al-Arian joining us out of Turkey this morning. We're heading straight for the news. We've got Zahid Jedwood standing by.